So, welcome everybody. I'm really pleased to introduce Ole Hoeffken from Heidelberg University. I know him for quite some time now, and I'm still surprised with a variety and breadth of his interests. He is going to talk about abduction today. I'm not going to even try to read the title, which is different from the announced one. He will explain us this, but he is also interested in evolutionary psychology. Not interested. He is lecturing evolutionary psychology at the University of Heidelberg. So at the end, I asked Ole to tell us a little bit, to have us talk, but I hope there will be some time for discussion. And Ole also told me that he is eager that what he's going to show us is a work in progress, and he is very eager to get your feedback. So I think that might be the most fruitful part of the day. So
yes.
Ole.
So thank you very much for this opportunity, and of course I don't lecture evolutionary psychology or anything. I'm just taking it up at certain points.
You have a seminar.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
today,
need the seminar.
Today we're gonna talk about something more theoretical, so about abduction. And who has heard of this in a context of cognition or theory of science, not in a crime context? Who has heard of abduction before? No one. Okay, so I'll try to explain a bit on this. And yeah, the title is a bit different. Simply for the reason that I was too lazy to change the title on all the slides, so it still has a title that I had before for this talk, which I also very much like because it's an allusion to a band I like. So it's called Build to Spill, and it also makes it clear why this is abduction for everyone, because I want to take it beyond explanation. So it's also meant to be a kind of inference, this is what abduction is, that can be applied by people who are not necessarily interested in doing scientific explanation. And this is, of course, on the one hand, philosophers. So philosophers are not always doing scientific explanation, or they do something very different, but nonetheless, it has been proposed that we can understand philosophy as a broadly abductive enterprise. So in a very programmatic paper, for example, Timothy Williamson made this claim. And I'm also interested in saying, okay, maybe it's not just philosophy broadly, but also more specifically, we can understand phenomenology applying this specific mode of inference. And as it turns out, there's also movement in this direction. So this is another paper, I don't know whether you can read this, but it's about phenomenology and abduction. It's by a phenomenologist from Australia, Jack Reynolds, and this is also still, as you can see, it's not published. It's going to come out in Phenomenology and the Cognitive Sciences, I think, this year. So there's really a movement towards this mode of inference. And I take this as the incentive to see how this could maybe be a productive methodology for us. Okay, so to motivate that for you, first of all, I have to also point to something else. So first of all, I want to understand abduction, independently of explanation, as I said, but also as a holistic kind of inference. We'll come to that. But first of all, I'm going to tell you what it is, then how we can understand it holistically, then how we can understand it maybe independently of explanation, and then I have something on the more application side, but we'll see whether we come to that or whether we just delve directly into the discussion of it. Okay, starting off with what is abduction, what is abductive inference. So for that we can just refer to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. They have a nice article there on it, although it's of course, there are contentious points of course. Abduction is a specific mode of inference, and as it is suggested, it is ubiquitous in everyday scientific and philosophical reasoning. And it's contrasted to the other two kinds of inference we generally classify. It's deduction and enumerative induction. And deduction is the kind of inference that is necessarily truth-preserving. So if the premises are true, then the conclusions we get out of these premises have to be true as well. In other words, the conclusion is a necessary condition for the premises. So this is what is going on in deductive logics, for example, that is widely applied in philosophy to structure arguments or to check arguments whether they are valid, and also what is going on, for example, in mathematics all over the place. So this is what working mathematicians use, deduction. And from that we can differentiate induction in a general sense. Induction are those inferences where the truth of the conclusion is not made necessary, but only, in a very broad sense, probable by the truth of the premises. So this is induction, just as a catch-all phrase. Everything that is not deduction is induction, first of all. And in a more specific sense, we got this enumerative induction, and this is what we often call induction in the scientific practice. And Duven informs us that this is just a kind of inference based purely on statistical data, such as observed frequencies of a particular feature in a given population. I won't go further into that, but just differentiate this now from abduction. Now we are actually there, which is marked by an implicit or explicit appeal to explanatory considerations. So this is the standard approach of understanding what is abduction, and because of this appeal to explanatory considerations, it's also often called inference to the best explanation. And whether we actually have to have this in there, this is what we're going to look at later. So, having an example, so as I said, they argue that this is also already used in just everyday reasoning. And for example, assume that you know that Tim and Harry have recently had a terrible row that ended their friendship, so this is premise one. Then you have another premise, you walk through the park and you see Tim and Harry are going jogging together. And now, the forthcoming inference from that, what can we draw from that? Which conclusion can we draw from that?
That your first information was wrong.
I can draw this from that, but assume that the premises are true.
Yeah. Obviously that they made up.
Yes, so Tim and Harry have made up, and we make such kind of inferences very naturally in everyday life. So, but what is going on here is not deduction, because it's in no way necessarily the case that they have made up just because of the premises. And we also don't do any reasoning with frequencies and probabilities here, but nonetheless we come up with such conclusions. So there should be some kind of other kind of inference going on here. And the idea now is that the conclusion is the best explanation of the premises. So of course we could come up with some totally different explanation. So maybe, as you pointed out, so maybe we're just seeing a hologram of Tim and Harry, or our perception is totally delusional or something, or they have been forced to go jogging together by some dark powers in the background. But these are all explanations, of course, for our gathered premises, but they are not very good explanations. What is a good, what is a bad explanation? We'll come to that. But this is the basic intuition behind what abduction is about. And this has been introduced, this term, into modern philosophy by Charles Sanders Peirce at the end of the 19th century, and still taken up again under the heading Inference to the Best Explanation in the 20th century. Okay, so abduction can play different roles. So we have creative abduction, which is understood as the process through which these explanatory hypotheses are produced in the first place. So they're created, and this is also what is going on in the context, the so-called context of discovery often. And then we have selective abduction, which is about selecting actually the best explanation among different competing explanatory hypotheses. And this is what I've shown you with comparing this to some other weird explanation that could be there as well. And this falls into what is called the context of justification. Then, of course, it's not going on just in everyday life, but also in science. And there it is said that, we make often inferences to the best explanatory theories of our observations, phenomena, data. And there we can explain particular events, but also more general states of affairs. So, for example, Kepler's laws of planetary movements can explain the movement of one particular planet, but then these laws of planetary movement are also generalized by Newtonian mechanics, which then explain these broader laws. So it's not only that we explain particular events, but we also explain certain theories by other theories. And as the last example already has shown, these explanations need not necessarily be causal. So it's not only that it's not always the case that we point to some cause behind the phenomena we observe, but also the relationship between one theory and the other is not that one theory causes the other, but somehow we still say, okay, it explains the broader theory explains the more specific theory. Okay, so this is just the motivation of what abduction is, and I'll just now throw a definition at you to make this a bit more precise, not motivating this to a very deep degree. But so abduction is a specific mode of inference opposed to deduction and induction, and it is proceeding along a relation of entailment or conditional probability from the premises to the conclusions. So this is interesting because it goes directly the opposite direction, the entailment, than from deduction. In deduction, the conclusions are, of course, entailed by the premises, but here we have it the other way around, and there has to be something more in play to actually make this inference, which we will come to in a second. But before that, I will just point you another thing that we get with abduction and with induction as well. Because the conclusions are not implied from the premises, as it is in deduction, this kind of inference mode is called ampliative. So we can go beyond the logical content of the premises. So it's not only finding out what was already implied in the premises, we can make inferences going beyond that. This is already the case in induction, enumerative induction, but abduction also gives us something more. Namely, it allows for what Stathis Psillos calls vertical extrapolation. That means that we can have descriptive vocabulary in the conclusions that has not been included in the premises because of these explanatory processes going on in the background. And we don't have this in enumerative induction. So in enumerative induction, we can only go from already observed frequencies to some probabilities about this, but the things we talk about are just the same in the premises and in the conclusions. Here we have, for example, we're talking about Tim and Harry, they're jogging together, they've had a fight, and then we come up with something totally different. Okay, they've made up. And this is now the simple case of it, but what Stathis Psillos is pointing towards is, of course, when we come up with explanatory theories in science, then we often go to wildly new areas of entities we've not imagined before. For example, we come up with descriptions of the atomic level of matter to explain how medium-sized objects behave. And this is a totally new field and a totally new kind of descriptive vocabulary. And I think this is also the motivation behind calling it vertical extrapolation, because we go from the macro level to a more fine-grained micro level. But this is not necessarily the case. So I think this is how he calls it. I'm going to stick with it, but the important thing is that we can move from one kind of phenomena to another kind of phenomena. Okay, and then, of course, how can we do this? The idea is that the explanatory power, or the idea that one hypothesis or theory we come up with is better than another, is measured by certain criteria or so-called explanatory virtues of a good theory. And many different kinds of taxonomies of such explanatory virtues have been proposed, but I stick with an approach or an account of it that has been proposed by Paul Fagert already, it's a philosopher and cognitive scientist, already in 1978, where he actually just points to 3 of them. So it's a very unifying, simple approach of understanding these explanatory virtues. And the most important ones, or who do the actual work, are the ones consilience and simplicity. Consilience is also a term from 19th century philosophy of science, and it describes that the theory can accommodate or account for or explain a broad array of different kinds of phenomena, or classes of phenomena. So you don't just explain one certain kind of observation, but a broad array of them. For example, evolutionary theory cannot just explain the variation in one particular species or one particular habitat, but in many species, in many habitats. So this is its explanatory breadth. And it's really consilient in a way that it makes, consilience means leaping together, so it makes many different phenomena leap together. And this consilience is in a trade-off with the virtue of simplicity, meaning that the theory doesn't have to have many auxiliary hypotheses in it. Auxiliary hypotheses are the ones that accommodate only very small arrays of phenomena. So of course I could make my theory very consilient, just crowding in all kinds of auxiliary hypotheses, and by this accommodating or accounting for all kinds of different phenomena. But then it would be no longer simple, it would be no longer be an elegant theory. So these two are in a trade-off with each other, and the idea is that what is going on in theory choice in science is actually always navigating this trade-off. And then there's another value or virtue of a good theory which is more complementary to the others. If you find analogies to things you have already described or explained, then this is also helps your theory, but I won't go into that in greater detail, because these two are the ones who are decisive. Okay, so far we have a rough account of abduction, and what we can see here already is that it is characterized here as a linear inference, just in the same way as we understand deduction and induction. We start from a given set of premises or evidence, and then we reach a conclusion through step-by-step application of rules of inference to a certain set or limited set of premises. So, and this is opposed to exactly the holistic understanding of abduction. This was also promoted by Paul Fagert, and abduction as a nonlinear, holistic inference is understood as applying rules of inference simultaneously to all premises or all evidences we have, given in a certain application, of course, and to the possible conclusions and hypotheses we might get to. So, what we start with here, Paul Fagert has also called this coherence-based inference, because he says we take all this stuff as input, so the premises and the evidences, and the possible hypotheses we may come up with, and then we bring this into a coherent whole. And this is what is going on in this holistic kind of inference. And so what we have is a set of elements, no longer just a set of premises, but just E for elements, and in there we have certain evidences or premises. I've just called it D for data, whatever, because E is already taken, so I've called it this way. So this is what we have, and we also have possible explanatory hypotheses in there. So this, we start with this whole set of evidences and possible hypotheses. And then we see this as a problem of simultaneous constraint satisfaction. That means that we have between these elements we start with certain relations of positive constraints, meaning a relation of coherence between them. So mutual coherence between these different elements. And also negative constraints, mutual relations of incoherence between them. And what we want to get to is the subset of E that maximizes the overall coherence we get into there. So this is the set A for we accept this. Is accepted, and this is the basic idea of holistic coherence-based inference. Okay, and so we can already see, because we want to take into account the whole coherence structure we have here, and all data and possible hypotheses at the same time. This is no longer just a linear kind of inference, but in this way, a holistic inference. Okay, so now we know roughly what this holistic thing is about, and this, as I said, based on a coherence relation, and this coherence relation, in turn, is brought about by a coherence-producing relation. So it's a more basic relation that is also, as opposed to coherence, which is symmetrical, usually not a symmetrical relation, but an asymmetrical one. For example, of course, the most important case is explanation. So certain hypotheses can explain other hypotheses or can explain certain evidences. But there's also deducibility, analogy, and also something more practical, for example, facilitation. So Thagard proposes to understand this not only for theoretical uses, but also for to understand practical decision making. For example, we can have also actions and certain goals within our set. We want to have a certain coherence, and then we have facilitation relations between them, and we want to bring this into a coherent whole. Okay, but I won't go into that. I will just concentrate on explanation right now. So we have again our set E with all the data and the hypotheses. And then we have all kinds of explanatory relations between them. So hypothesis H1 explains H2, H2 explains D1, and so on. And this is just, for the sake of this model, it's just taken as input, as given. And this coherence-producing relation then in somehow induces this, or produces this coherent structure on set E. So if something explains something else, this is of course good for coherence. If something, for example, H5 and H2, they stand in competition with one another in explaining V1, then this is bad for the two, so they are in incoherence with each other. And of course, this production of coherence can't just be random. It has to follow certain structural principles, and these are called the coherence principles by Thagard. And these coherence principles, I'll just show them to you very quickly because they're interesting with regards to what we've earlier seen as the explanatory virtues. So this is how they look like. They're way too small, I see, but we're not going to read them right now. I'll just point you I just point out something about this. So we have these coherence principles, and they, as I said, they describe how this process here comes about. So we have a coherence-producing relation, these principles governing this process, and then we have a coherence structure. So these principles, in a way, give an implicit definition of what coherence is. Thagard in no place defines explicitly what coherence should be, but only characterizes what coherence is with these principles governing how coherence behaves. And furthermore, what is interesting about them is that they formalize the explanatory virtues that govern inference to the best explanation in a certain way. I won't go into that because we don't have time and so on. So a certain principle here formalizes consilience to other, together with the acceptability condition, formalize simplicity, and then we also have a certain principle for analogy. So this is somehow built into this model that the explanatory virtues are fulfilled through coherence-based inference. And furthermore, what is interesting is that we have a foundationalist element here, because principle 4, data priority, says that these evidences we have, or data we have, they have an acceptability on their own. So this is not a pure coherentism. It's a mixture of coherentism and a certain foundationalist element. So it's not just one coherent set that we build up, but we also have to respect the data in some way. Although, of course, we can reject certain evidences or data. For example, if we come to the conclusion, this must be delusional, my impression must be wrong. Okay, so this is how it works again. The general structure, and now we have a coherence-producing relation, we have the principles, and they bring about a coherent structure. Now the big task is, of course, finding this set A that maximizes the overall coherence. And because this is a holistic process, this can't be done, in a linear fashion. We have to have some kind of search algorithm that does this job for us. And Thagard, who's my whom I'm working with here, or I work with his model, and he looks at different algorithms, and he actually ends up with an algorithm that is based on connectionist models for neural networks. So I think you will know much more about this than me or most people around here. And he chooses it because it's computationally feasible. So it's actually possible to do this task, and it's not computationally too expensive. And it also has it has a good track record, so it's very powerful in doing this task. And how this works is that he looks at he makes an analogy to a connectionist network where we have these units. I think they stand for units in a connectionist networks.
Sometimes nodes.
Okay. So their nodes or units. It's just the interpretation is not so important. Important is just that this algorithm actually is good in doing this job. And we have the units, and they stand, of course, for our elements. We have this input here, and for every coherence relation, we have a bidirectional excitatory connection. And for every incoherence relation, we have a bidirectional inhibitory connection. So we don't even need unidirectional connections. And so we just built this.
Can I ask, what is excitatory and inhibitory in this case? What would that mean?
So I'll just say how this process then works. So at the beginning, all the units are activated at once. So this is the holistic approach. So they are all activated, and then they start inhibiting or exciting each other with a certain decay factor. So it goes in. So the whole system then takes several terms
several turns on the same nodes.
Yes.
Same values of the nodes.
No. So the activation values of the nodes, of course, they vary then, but they activate each other with this decay factor. And
what is changing within these cycles? I mean, between these cycles.
What is changing is the activation of the single nodes.
Okay, but the values on the, let's say, neurons or nodes are the same.
No. The
activations are changing.
Yeah, the activations of the neurons are changing.
But what's the function? I mean, how it is calculated? How is computing this activation? Because we have different activation functions.
Yeah. So I don't know the function now from my head, but of course, what is built into it is this decay thing, so that it's actually not. It's not. It's not the connection or the excitatory links are not as strong as they are in the first round, as in the second round and the third round. So it's going down. But of course, this shows that each of the units needs activation from the others to actually stay activated. But yeah, so we can go into this later. I'm happy with this because, of course, as I said, I think you will know much better about this than me. I'm just looking at this and saying, okay, cool, this does the job. So this is the algorithm he ends up with. And there are other algorithms that are also kind of workable, but yeah, this is just the best track record. Okay, so I hope this is clear enough. Otherwise, yes. So I'm also happy to learn more about this if you can give feedback on that. But of course, I'm not the one who developed this, so I think I'm also maybe the wrong person to defend it. So yeah, what we've got now is we have a coherence producing structure. We have a coherence problem or task here. We have hopefully some algorithm that can do the job. And what we can now do is we can apply this actually to cases of abductive reasoning. For example, we have here from Thagard reconstructions of Darwin's argument for evolutionary theory from Darwin's works. And what we have is you have all kinds of evidences here. And we have Darwin's proposals how evolution works. And we have, as the competing theory, just the creationist hypothesis. Species were separately created by God. So this is a bit like another hypothesis, I think. But this is how it worked in the work of Darwin. And he makes explicit appeal to such considerations of coherence in his work. And as you can see, we have much more explanatory power here because we can explain much more. And what we also have, this wave line indicates an analogy to inheritance of traits in breeding. So we have, this is also strengthens the argument if we have such analogous cases to our theory. Okay, won't go into detail here, just wanted to show you that one can actually apply this to make philosophy of science. And maybe also we can understand what is going on in philosophical methods or phenomenological methods. We can at least model it maybe in that way, and then we'll see how good it works. Okay. So I'm already talking, I think, for half an hour. So I think I'll just skip this one. So what we can do now is you can look it up again on slide 7. I've given you this general definition of abduction, and now of course we can interpret this definition within this holistic framework. And what we have now is I wanted to call this one prime. It's just it's space between there. So we have this feature of abduction, that it's proceeding along a relation of entailment or conditional probability from the premises to the conclusions, because what we have is that in our explanatory relationships here, what is included is always some kind of entailment. So this is like a minimal condition on explanation. So, for example, if we do this huge inference here and accept this set, we can interpret this as saying, okay, part of this is the small inference that we have had this data stuff here, D1 and D2, and from this we have inferred H2. For example, this is Tim and Harry jogging together, Tim and Harry having had a telluride row. Okay, so we go to the hypothesis they have made up. And what this includes is, of course, this is an explanatory relationship. This includes, in turn, the relation of entailment. So we have an interpretation of this first feature of abductive reasoning. We can interpret it in this setting. Then it's also ampliative, because relationships of ampliation between the propositions, so the evidence propositions and the hypotheses we come up with, are possible or even expectable in this set A that we take as the acceptance set. And then it's allowing for vertical extrapolation, because this is also going to be expectable in this set A we come up with. And last but not least, it's also proceeding by abductive virtues, because as I've shown you, the conditions of coherence, or these principles of these coherence principles, which are optimized by A, they instantiate the abductive values consilience, simplicity, and analogy. Okay, so now we've seen how this holistic understanding of abduction, but now of course it's interesting to see now to ask ourselves, okay, does it have to be linked to explanation? And this is actually my little suggestion within this framework, because as we can observe in Fagot's theory of explanatory coherence, explanatory relations are actually just primitively given. So he just takes them as input. So explanation itself is actually not inferred holistically. Only coherence, and with this, the best explanation is inferred holistically in Fagot's framework. But I hold that we should expect, if we are in this holistic spirit, already the inference of any potential explanation to be a holistic process. And my proposition to get to this is to generalize Fagot's holistic coherence-based account of abduction by making it independent of the notion of explanation, namely by taking a more general relation than explanation to be the coherence-producing one, namely entailment or conditional probability. As we've just seen, this is part of the minimal. So this is just core of the notion of explanation. Any kind of explanation would have to have some entailment or conditional probability in it. So we can see now this argument goes that there are internal reasons to this account of abductive inference that we should maybe generalize this and make it independent of the notion of explanation. Of course, then we can have certain cases of abduction which are explanatory, but our general understanding isn't. And so this is the internal reason, but what falls out of this for philosophy, and maybe also for phenomenology, is that if we make it independent of the notion of explanation, then we can maybe apply it also to philosophical and phenomenological reasoning, which is usually not thought of as being explanatory as, for example, scientific reasoning. So, Fagot isn't too happy with this, but I'm not going to go into it. So this is really a step away from that. And what I do is that if you look at these features I've given I'm jumping around, sorry. So if you look at the handout on slide 16, there you can see again these 1 prime, 2 prime, 3 prime, 4 prime, and when we look at it, we can see that actually only 1 prime includes reference to explanation. So the relevant coherence-producing relation in A, that is explanation, includes entailment or conditional probability. And my idea now is to say, okay, we can generalize this by saying the relevant coherence-producing relation in A simply is entailment or conditional probability. Okay, and this goes in the direction of what Williamson also has in mind, but this is just as a side note. And as I already said, this goes beyond the thesis that there are non-explanatory cases of abduction. Rather, it says that the core of abductive inference can be understood without reference to explanation. And now, this is my idea, this broad explanation-independent understanding of abduction is built to spill beyond the explanatory cases of it. For example, it can spill over to broader philosophical approaches or maybe even phenomenological approaches. Okay, so now we have to worry, of course, about entailment or conditional probability. How does this new and broader coherence-producing relation behave? And I'm not going to go into conditional probability right now. I haven't thought about this so far. I'm just going to look at entailment. And what we can see here is already that entailment is coherence-producing cannot simply be logical consequence. Because on the one hand, this would be too restrictive. Since logical consequence alone does not yield many interesting entailments. We have to include also relations of material and not only of formal entailment. So material entailment is what is governed by the predicates actually being in the sentence. It's the actual content of the sentence. It's not only the formal, the logical form of the sentences. For example, if something is red all over, then it cannot be blue all over. This would be an example, a very simple example of material inference. Or material entailment, sorry. But on the other hand, it's also too permissive since, for example, the premises of a valid logical consequence may simply be conjunctive with any other proposition we have in E, and we have to exclude such cases because then explanatory producing relations would be all over the place. Okay, these are the two requirements we have to meet, and to deal with A, I propose to specify material entailment relations, and we just put them into a certain set, B, for background assumptions, and include this into our coherence problem. So we have to make our background assumptions explicit to actually gain such material entailment relations. And to deal with B, I propose to accept only so-called non-redundant entailments as coherence producing. And with this, I understand entailment relations. So an entailment relation between a certain set of propositions in E, and from that we get a certain one proposition. And it is non-redundant if and only if. P is, so the proposition we actually get is not already included in P. This excludes the trivial case of self-implication. Then this just says that we can't derive a contradiction from P, either with our material background assumptions, or if we just leave this open here, already logical contradictions. And this excludes the application of ex causal quadruped if we have something in our logic, so I don't want to exclude this, which should also be not a very interesting entailment, so this should not go into our coherence considerations. And thirdly, this set of premises is what I call, or it's a condition on it, that it is a locally minimal set of premises for entailing P. So I can't take a subset of P P prime, and already which already entails the proposition in question. And this condition prevents this conjunctive cluttering of my premise set. So it's actually everything I have in here in my premise set is actually relevant for entailing the proposition in question. Okay, so this is non-redundant entailment, and this is what I want to use now as the coherence-producing relation, together with the material entailments. For that, this is the old picture. We have explanatory relations here, but now we're going to change it and take these non-redundant entailments. And of course, there are more entailments than there are. As you can see, there's something coming. There's some extra. There are more entailments than explanatory relations, because not every entailment is by and in itself explanatory. And then I've also made room down here for our set of background assumptions, and these background assumptions then give us certain material entailments between certain propositions. And the rest, of course, is just logical entailment. And actually, every entailment arrow here should have something, either coming from the set B or coming from logics, actually implying this entailment. But this would be too many arrows in this picture. And this then, with our known coherence principles we already have, this produces the coherent structure on the set. And we do our good old holistic, algorithmically generated process to find out the best or the most coherent set here. This is then, of course, no longer the inference to the best explanation, but only an inference to, let's say, the most coherent set in entailment terms. So maybe inference to the most unifying account or something like that. And the idea is that now we have potential explanations no longer as input of this process, but rather what we've accepted here, they are accepted by virtue of the entailment relations, and then after this holistic process we can say, okay, maybe this one is explanatory for this one, but then other conditions of course have to be met, and this is something I'm then ignorant about, so I'm neutral towards the actual understanding of explanation we might have. Okay, so I think I should just make a cut here and answer questions, and the big question is, of course, how does this help us with phenomenology or with empirical research? Or is this just abstract nonsense? So first of all, I'm just happy to take questions about how this works, and then hopefully we can think about whether this is of any use for more applied research.
So, thank you so much. I think this is a really great sort of way to do philosophy, to meet more empirically oriented people and get feedback from them, not necessarily taking feedback seriously, or being concerned about the feedback, but also because if you want to apply philosophy, then you need some kind of idea. So I think the audience here is just right for this kind of feedback. So I would invite your feedback, and I will jump in later, perhaps.
Yeah. So I just have a question. So what's the main goal of all this that you do? So is that to find a somehow formalized model for abduction, or
Yeah, so yes, it is the goal to find a formalized model for abduction, but I think we have to make a very important distinction here. What do we want to model? Do we want to model what we might call the structure of abduction or the process of abduction? So, and this is a model of the structure. So, of course, this this algorithm being applied here does not purport to be what is actually going on in an abductive process. It just shows us that this is how these structures are related. We have certain inputs we can characterize formally, and we have certain outputs we can characterize formally. And abduction is the process that takes us from there to there, from the input set to the output set. And all these models is the input and the output set. The process then, yeah, this is a totally different story. And I myself am skeptical about whether we could actually formally model this and whether this could be of any, so whether this is feasible.
Yeah, because one question, I think it's obvious for all this. This is in fact, what psychologists say, the problem of relevance. I mean, you ask, how do you find possible hypotheses? I mean, you say we have here background hypothesis. If you already spell out background hypothesis, then it's okay, because it's nearly the same as you have premises. So, how do you find background hypothesis?
Where do you get them from?
Where do you get from them? I mean, that's the main question.
Yeah. So I think the idea would be that we find out when we think about this stuff in our messy process of doing abductive reasoning, or just reasoning in general, we find out, oh, I have the strong intuition that this hypothesis has to hang together with this kind of evidence.
But which hypothesis?
Yeah.
Which hypothesis? For example, Taggart obviously modeled Darwin, which is a very brave attempt. So, but Darwin at some point had to say, oh, there must be, I don't know how he thought it, but something like natural selection there. That at some point, this completely new stuff had to emerge, and then you can put it into a logical framework and do something with it. But how, that was your question. Isn't that the all that is important? How this new hypothesis, never seen before, popped up.
This is the creative
abduction. You are not aware of the background knowledge, and that's the problem.
Yeah. So, and what the modeling is then, I think the value of the modeling is then that you have an incentive to make it explicit. And that you say, okay, this has to hang together with that. I just have this hunch, or I have this feeling that these two phenomena
this is a magic. This is a magic. But you always say this too. But the first one is okay, is a problem. But the other one is the new hypothesis that never seen before.
Yeah.
So when, as Olga said, when you have this hypothesis, I think everything is done. Then it's just a little bit of actually what actually happens then is you of course you are so happy you put it out and other scientists either demolish it or improve it or confirm it. But before that, this is the point that is really interesting.
This is very interesting, but also the point of demolishing or justifying it.
But
this is also hard work. This is what this model is about. So that
magical part in the beginning, the emergence of new kind of understanding this data or whatever, this is not included here.
This is not included here, and I would be, as I said, skeptical whether we can make such kind of model of this. I think this would be, not very kind to creative processes, or maybe it's the wrong way to think of creative processes in such a formal way. But the part of how the structure of what we want, what we start with, what we want to get to, and why it's actually good that we got there. This is why it is justified.
So would you say that you think that, for example, Darwin had different hypotheses and then went through this? Because I don't think so. I think he was baffled, and then the hypothesis came out, and then he spent 20 years checking it out and everything, and avoiding publishing and everything, but at the end he published it. I don't think he had 3 different hypotheses and then,
but this is not necessary, that he comes up with different hypotheses. I think this is
But
also more
the
about
model you showed here was how Darwin came up with a...
No, it's not just Darwin. Darwin, in his work, contrasts this to the creationist hypothesis.
Yeah.
Maybe you could also, I'm not an expert in this, maybe you could also contrast it to Lamarckian evolution or something like this. But the idea here is that hypotheses are not only good in themselves, they're always good relative to other hypotheses. And often they are maybe not made explicit. But this is what is going on in the justification process.
Okay, so Darwin did not do the justice. He did not do abduction, obviously, because obviously he was just unhappy with the previous hypothesis, whichever that was, and observed the stuff, got intimate with it, and found new or created new hypotheses, and then spent the rest of the time confirming it or debunking it or whatever. And so there was no alternative hypothesis that he dealt with.
Yeah, he did. He confronted this creationist hypothesis in his work. So he said, I can explain better than the creationist story of Christianity. I can explain all this stuff better.
So you would say there was an abduction present there?
Yeah, there was creative abduction, of course, because he had to come up with a hypothesis in the first place. And then he...
One hypothesis?
No, many, you know.
Which were the other hypotheses?
It's a whole framework of different hypotheses of how this process works. So, you have inheritance, selection, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's a whole theory framework, and you also have to find out, okay, how are they related to each other, and then the next step in abduction is comparing them to competing hypotheses and justifying them in that way.
I'm not sure that Darwin did that. There was, of course, this competing hypothesis, but I'm not sure that he was like doing, oh, if we do this, then this one is better. I think he started with rejecting the competing after seeing some data on his travels, and then created a new one, and then just was checking and refining it.
Yeah, so as I said, the process itself can go all kinds of ways, but this is just the model of how the structure is, and it's also more the structure of a scientific community. It's not just this that one person has to do the work all by himself. Everybody can contribute something to this. So maybe someone just contributes a certain entailment relation, or says, okay, wait a second, in this entailment relation we have this background assumption going in and making this explicit. So everybody can contribute here, and it's not a process that has to be only one person.
Yeah, okay. I'm just trying to have the concrete example, and I cannot relate. That's just, of course he can, or everybody can contribute, but in Darwin's case, I don't think it was like that. People were, he was getting all this data from different pigeon farmers and around the world and so on. But I don't think anybody said, oh, there is another, or checking his hypothesis, or this was his solitary work.
So Darwin, maybe Darwin did it in that way, but what was going on, at least, what was going on then in the history of science and in the scientific community is that such a process such a structure was realized. So
okay, I think we get to Olga's question. How do you apply this? What would it mean to apply this?
Applying philosophy. So the idea is, to first of all point to the fact that even in philosophy we need certain evidences we start from. And of course this is, this is called data here, but evidence is of course much better. And this is already a point that you can make with this kind of approach. So if you want to understand philosophy also as abductive, for example, like everyday reasoning and the sciences, then you have to produce some kind of evidence you start with, and you this can't be it's good to be actually also explicit about this and in a consensus about what the evidence is we start with. And so, of course, this is an open field. You know, how do we produce evidence for philosophical inquiry? And I think this is where phenomenology could make a great contribution. And then, of course, you know, this is not a process that is just bottom up. We also have all these kinds of hypotheses in the background. So, however they come up, and we also have background assumptions. And so this is a model with which we can understand, for example, how a research process, for example, empirical phenomenology, is unfolding, or not unfolding. How is it structured? How it's structured? It can unfold in all kinds of ways. But also here we have certain evidences, and we have certain hypotheses that are not explaining, but they are generalizing our evidences. And we have a lot of background assumptions. And we can never explicate this to the full degree. But we have, here we have a model, okay, maybe this works, or this is structured in this way. And another way of putting, or another thing that falls out of this for philosophy is that there is a debate in philosophy that people, it's not so clear how we deal with evidence. What do we take as good evidence, what not? Is just any old intuition good evidence? Do we have to accommodate this? And this picture actually makes it possible to say, okay, but maybe we also have to reject some of the evidence of the intuitions that philosophers have. So this is a new understanding, or different understanding of how we can deal with the fact that we cannot accommodate all the intuitions, and this opens up, or this broadens the methodological self-understanding of philosophy. This is the first very general application I have in mind.
Just as a proof of concept, could you provide a concrete example that follows this process?
Yeah, so of course, you know, again, it's not the process in a way, but the idea is that, for example, we have certain, so the good old question in philosophy is, what is knowledge? And we have different intuitions of what knowledge is. For example, it is some kind of belief, it has to be true, and it has to be justified. So we take this, for example, as input here. But then we have also all kinds of crazy other free cases that are very on the edge of this definition and challenge this definition. And for example, Williamson, he doesn't use this framework, but he then in his abductive philosophy paper, or this approach of abductive philosophy says, I mean, this is not the case in this picture, but also certain evidences can fall out. And then he says, okay, these evidences, these free cases, maybe we don't have to accommodate them with our general hypotheses of what knowledge is. So maybe we just have to accommodate, it's justified true belief, but not other stuff that is lying out here, because it's not coherent with the whole system. So this would be a toy example of how this could work in the applied in philosophy. This is like theoretical philosophy. The big question for me is, of course, is it of any sense for example, more empirically inclined phenomenology? And I'm still not so sure about this. Yeah, but I hope.
So I'm thinking about it in the context of, you show this model that uses a neural network, and within this neural network you could simulate the connections between the data and the hypothesis. Would it be applicable to construct a model as this, throw in all of your hypotheses, throw in all of your data, and use a neural network to help you discover missing links, or help you discover possible points where more data could be useful, where a hypothesis might be hidden?
So this was my also my idea that, you know, this is, as I said, this whole thing is just about justification or selective abduction, but then there's also, I think I hope I got that correctly, that you were going more in the direction of creation of new structures, new hypotheses, how things can hang together. And of course, we can look at what we've got out of the process, and then we can see tensions there, for example. There's still there can even be contradictions in there. And then we can see, okay, we have a contradiction here, or we have very weak coherence here only. Maybe we have to back this up more. Maybe we also have to generate more evidence in this direction, or we have to throw something out. Maybe we have to throw a hypothesis. And so this could already, this could also guide the new creation of hypotheses, of course, or new creation of evidence also. Whatever. I'm not going to go into this.
Maybe one more question. So you're probably familiar with the predictive processing account of cognition, right?
Not really. I'm sorry.
And you mentioned it one of the slides, I think.
A predictive process.
Like conditional probability, which is exactly the same.
But I haven't gone into this yet, so I'm very sorry.
Okay.
But teach me about it. So.
I mean, that would be beyond the time frame that we have available, but I would be eager to hear your opinion about this, because I think that in this predictive processing brain, or Bayesian brain as they call it, abduction is very intimately related to, because it goes, as you said, abduction goes beyond what is beyond the premises, and the same happens, at least in my interpretation, in the predictive processing account, where what is the output of this constant processing is not just entailed in the hypothesis, but is something more. So something like that. So I find a very intimate relationship, and I would be really.
So I'm maybe not the right person to ask about this. I can only tell you what I've read about this. So I haven't gone into this yet, but what I've read about this is first that these. That there are people arguing that these virtues, these abductive virtues, as I would call it, they were usually called explanatory virtues, but I want to get rid of explanation, so I have to call them abductive virtues. But they are considered to be a good proxy or good heuristics to find what is actually raising probability. So this is one connection I know of, which I've just read about, and I don't know the details. And then, of course, I'm not. I first have to learn about Bayesianism and everything. But Stathis Pseudos, I think he also makes the point that this vertical extrapolation, he says, this is only possible in abduction, but not in Bayesianism.
What is this?
Vertical extrapolation. So coming up with these totally new hypotheses that include totally different descriptive vocabulary. But maybe you can just help me out.
But you just told us before that this is not the part of this theory. This is outside. This is called creative abduction. It comes. This is the magic that happens, and then from here on we explain. Wasn't that? So it's also not a part of abduction theory or.
But creative and selective abduction, they are connected. So, that
was I think our grinding before because I guess I can say we believe that this is the really funny part, how the new hypothesis arises, and if I understand you correctly, this is outside the scope of our talk. This is just we have magically obtained new hypothesis, and now we can do the nice logic, and from here on I completely agree with Yash. Actually, I wrote down that before and I forgot about it. This is very, very similar to predictive coding or Bayesian probability, conditional probability, because this is a process coming from both sides, and then you have a priors or expectations, anticipation, and on the other side you have whatever data, let's call it that way, and then they collapse somehow together. So it's not top down, it's not bottom up, it's both. So in that way, I find this very close to abduction, but you need to have stuff on both sides. And so if you said, oh, but here we can create new stuff, but this is, if I understand correctly, outside. And we have a colleague, Donders, or not anymore, Donders, who is, that's her study focus actually, you know, how can we keep with predictive coding hypothesis and still allow for new stuff to be created. And I think the same question goes for this. And I'm not sure, but please correct me if I'm wrong, that just adding creative to abduction solves this. We just allow for new stuff, but of course we allow for that. But we don't model this new emergence of the new.
No, I think no. This modeling this would, you know, I think go against the idea that it is creative, because if you have a predictive model of it, then
Well, predictive, but you can have some other model that is creative.
Yeah, but only ex post. So you can never say, okay, this is how it's going to work. You can only, but what this informs, you know, how this informs the creative process, it gives you certain points to look at. You can see, okay, I have attention here in the system. Oh, I have too little data there. Oh, I have to have some new connection, and there should be entailment here. And then you can look there. Okay, is there really entailment, or well, have I been on the wrong track? And maybe this is also the case with predictive processing, so that you can also use these structures like as heuristics or guiding threads to create new hypotheses. But it only points towards creation. It is not creation in itself.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Some more questions, perhaps. Okay, let's wrap it up. I think. Thank you so much. I think we can have coffee or something and grind all a little bit more. but I think for this formal part that was quite enough. So thank you so much. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.